My new book, Pillars for Life, A Guide to Spiritual Ethics and Practice, is now out and available for you to read and purchase. You can check out our website, willowhealing.org, to find a link, or you can find it on Amazon. We look forward to getting your feedback, and if you love it, please leave a review and share with your friends. Now it's time for the show. Welcome to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We are so excited to have you joining us on this journey where we explore different ways to empower your soul, whether it's healing in your kitchen or all the way up in the corporate world. Come with us as we look into different ways to heal your mind, body, and soul. Hey everyone, it's Catherine from Willow Healing Matters. Despite technical difficulties, I am here with the beautiful Tigrilla Gardenia, and she is a certified ICF PCC Life Coach, and she collaborates with plants to guide creative multipotentialities. My goodness, you're trying me with words today. Towards finding their path of personal growth and evolution. With her roots intertwined with Damanhur, the world's largest spiritual eco community, Tigrilla infuses her teachings with the principles of the Kabbalah, Esoteric Teachings, and other ancient traditions. Through online courses, personalized coaching, and captivating live classes, she equips individuals with practical tools to attune to nature's rhythms, evolve from limiting beliefs, and create a flourishing life in harmony with themselves and the planet. Tigrilla is the founder of the Naturally Conscious Community and the host of ReConnect with Plant Wisdom podcast. And so a big welcome to the show, Tigrilla, and thank you for putting up with my technical difficulties today.
Not a worry at all. Thank you so much for having me. And trust me, this week has been gremlins all around when it comes. Like the whole little tech gremlins are out. Like so it's
You know, I
comprehensive.
often when it starts, I'll go, is it Mercury retrograde time already? And I'm looking at my phone, I'm like, no, we're still like a good month off. We're not even in the shadow period yet. But there's just something at the moment. I don't know if it's the solar flares or what it is, but it really is messing with the internet,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Well, there's solstice, right? Like when we're recording this, it's solstice is right around the corner
Yeah.
too, which is not to be discounted. That's a big time in like movements and such.
So very true. So I have so many questions for you, and I know we've talked briefly before, but I love how you actually use plant wisdom and have combined it with coaching. So what pulled you down to that path? Were you always connected with Mother Nature, or it's something that came about?
No, yeah, it was definitely something that came about. When I first moved to Damanhur, like you said in the intro, I live in this spiritual community that's been around for 50 years. And yeah, I call it Hogwarts for adults. Haven't found a better term, but it's like gives the impression of what it's like to live here. And here is where I started to have my plant reawakening. I ended up in contact or followed kind of a musical thread that took me to a plant that was using this device that we developed here in the community called the Music of the Plants to create music, to compose music live. And it was like all of a sudden, I see you, kind of the whole avatar thing. I see you. I think, where, and it's funny because a lot of people actually think that Avatar, since it was written by an Italian, think that Avatar was based on us, which, could be very possible. But this plant reawakening sort of opened me up to a whole series of things that I had just never thought about in that context. And the idea of understanding our lives as this living ecosystem, the idea of the fact that we have so many more senses than what we probably know of in the main five that we talk about, like all these different aspects that when you look at the plant world and you look at plants in general is quote unquote natural, right? Which means it's normal. It's the idea I can't run away. It's the idea I have to use everything. I have to find its purpose. And all of a sudden, the whole concept of the way that we as human beings had thought about life, which is if I don't like it, I leave it. If I'm threatened by it, I run away from it. If I think that it's something that's bad for me, I try to get rid of it. Plants can't do that, and an ecosystem doesn't really work that way. It's all about composting and sucking in and using and adapting and resilience. And there's all these elements. And so the deeper I went into the rabbit hole of plants as, living entities and beings with a whole series of intelligence that comes from their 470 million years on this planet, the more it kind of reflected and mirrored back to me my own life. And I started to see my own language, my own characteristics, things that I had maybe labeled or judged in a completely different light. And as I would talk to people, I could see them also in a different light. Like it inspired curiosity. It opened me to realizing that, oh, that person is saying this thing. And I'm like, how is that coming into my ecosystem and what am I doing with it? So that whole plant reawakening just broadened everything that I knew and also created this flow between this sort of spiritual side and this more scientific side, and how those two are actually the same thing. They're just using different vocabulary and being applied in a slightly different way. So yeah, it's kind of always hard to explain. And I often say that when I get lost for words, it's usually a good thing, because I'm a bit of a talker. And so when I get lost for words, it's usually because my plantness, that inner part of myself that is in presence, that is sensing fully, is kind of activated. And it takes a minute before the words kind of find their places in order to come out.
Yeah, I love that analogy, and how that ecosystem and connecting into all that wisdom that Mother Nature
Mhm.
has, and all that wisdom that all the ecosystems carry, like down to, the mycelium network that happens under the soil, and tapping into all those micro parts of nature can be such a reflective practice for how we stand in this world, exactly like you said. And often when I feel similar to you, when you run out of words, sometimes you just have to feel and be present, because
Exactly.
if you don't have the words, if you don't have the words, you're not meant to have the words. And sometimes an experience is really hard to put words to, especially when you're working with nature. It's like, just go be, just go be in the presence of the tree, or go be in the presence of that huge, amazing rock, or that mountain, or whatever energy it is that you're being surrounded by, and let it flow in and see what it has to teach you.
Yeah, and I think that this is an important part of ourselves. Like, part of that plant reawakening is that, what I call the inner plantness, and the fact that we as human beings, we're animals, right? And the animal world is about action, right? That's the reason why I usually am mobile. That's the reason why I can get around, and it's about getting things done, in whatever way that might be. And when I think about my inner plantness, I think about presence, because a plant is sessile, right? A plant is moving in a different time dimension. Doesn't mean they're static, but it's about movement, where I don't know where my next source of energy is going to come from, right? Because today is a great example. It's cloudy. It's been rainy for the last few days. The plants are taking in all this water, but also planning for the fact that they don't know when the water is going to stop. And so they have to kind of adjust. They have to understand what indicators the world gives them to understand how long this water is going to last. What can I do with it? Where do I move it in order for me not to drown, and yet still have it accessible for the days when the drought comes? And by the same point, they don't know when the sun is going to come back out, right? So what is this rain also telling me about how long is it going to be here? Because I need to know when my next photosynthesis is going to be, and how do I conserve any energy that I need to conserve in order to be able to survive up until that moment lands. So there's this inner stillness that, when we work really closely with plants, we get to tap into, that says, rather than being afraid that, I don't know, my next paycheck is not going to come, or I don't know how to eat, or I don't know how to do this thing, right? What if I listen to that stillness, and I open up my sensors, and I start to say, what is my environment around me telling me about what is happening? How do I become more attuned so that I'm not living in the fear of my mind, which oftentimes comes from a societal conditioning of different sorts, and instead I'm tuning into the natural sensor that I am, and then marrying that, in other words, what comes through that inner plantness that's inside of me, and marrying that to my action based animal nature. And so these parts start to create a harmony that in the natural world we see, right? We see when healthy ecosystems have the animals and the plants, and like you said, the fungi and, the bacteria and all these different elements that are working in harmony, and they're moving through different parts. And I have, to a certain extent, a microcosm of that within me. And I have just tuned it completely out. I've tuned out all of these elements. So really working with plants, because they are different enough from us to take me out of the conditioned response, but close enough, evolutionarily speaking, and close enough, even physically speaking, that I can still somewhat relate if I give myself the space for it.
Mm. And I love how you were saying, like, that reminder that we are part of the animal kingdom, because so often that human ego wants to discount that. But it's like, no, we are animals. We need to be aware of what's happening around us. And I love how you shared as well how, when there's all these things happening, sometimes it's just that stillness to stop and listen. And I had a beautiful example of that today, because I was just in this peace and flow, being a mom, doing what I needed to do, and then this beautiful yellowtail black cockatoo just lands on this tree near our house and just stayed. And they very rarely stay. They're almost like a flight bird, like they're really hard to catch. And I was like, oh, wow, look. And it was a big male. And I was just staring there and I was like, wow, how beautiful. And then we had on the other extreme these tiny little sparrows, like the ones that have they flit so quickly. And it was just so beautiful watching that contrast, but also just seeing how nature's there present and waiting for them, like whether or not that black cockatoo was scouting out a nest, which I feel it was doing for, to start a family, or, whether or not it's the little bird hiding in the very tiny bit of the wattle bush. It doesn't matter, because they're just there holding presence, like you said, and they're just there having that interaction with the animals. They're having that interaction with life around them. And they don't care really. They're just like, I'm present in the moment. I'm aware of kind of what's going on, but at the same time, I'm not letting fear envelope my experience of being here in nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when we tap into that inner plantness, I find that all of a sudden the external world, like we think of the external world as loud, and to a certain extent it is loud, but in part we use the word loud with this kind of negative connotation of as if that's like a bad thing, only because we don't know how to attenuate to it. We don't know. We think of ourselves like my hearing doesn't have an on-off switch or a volume dial. All I know is this loudness that it has. And in reality, we do have a lot more of attenuating skills. We do have the ability to refine what's coming through our senses and filter it or direct it in certain ways. Again, there are more pieces of ourselves that we have forgotten. So as a coach, that's a big piece, and a mentor, that's the big piece of what I do. And the reason why I use the term life coaching, because it really is about how do I create this living ecosystem inside of me where I can be actionable and actually present and still, where I can attenuate all of these different inputs that are coming in. And more importantly, as you were saying about here you are, you have a tree, you have these birds. The tree doesn't change their shape 100% for the birds. And yet there are micro changes that are happening while still staying true to being tree, right? While still, like I'm looking out at a beautiful tree outside who is surrounded, well, not today because it's raining, but it's usually in this period of the year. Like yesterday, there was swallows all flying around, and there was this beautiful hawk that was playing with the swallows, and they were coming in and out of the branches. And I am sure that Gary, the silver fir that's in front of me, has modified slightly over the years how the branches exactly land in order to ensure that as the swallows come every single year, there is an ability for the swallows to play through, like, don't make myself too dense, don't make myself. But Gary is still Gary the silver fir. That is still a silver fir, the size of a silver fir, with the shape, with the, everything about the silver fir that is true, author, and authentic to that being. So I think that also helps us, that when we start to work closely with plants, we get a better understanding of what it means to evolve in harmony with another, whether we're talking about another human being or, an environment, or whether we're even talking about a situation like my work or, some community project that I'm a part of. How do I evolve with it and allow myself to adapt without losing myself and my true essence in the project? How do we kind of test different shapes and directions and modalities of communication until we find that, signaler receiver connection antenna that allows us to communicate more clearly without either one of us having to compromise who we actually are? Birds still sing and plants don't, but plants send a whole series of messages that we know that the bird receives. You don't have to both speak in song or both speak in chemical signatures for you to be able to accurately communicate between one another. And we as humans don't have to change ourselves to be able to completely change ourselves and like denaturalize ourselves in order to be able to be in a group or in a situation that's kind of different from ourselves, in order just to be able to flow and be a harmony and be able to work in it. I can still be me, you can still be you, and we can still be in relationship with our own authentic selves.
And that's such a beautiful way to summarize that, Tigrilla, because so often you'll meet people and they'll, especially in a relationship, oh, I'll change them. They'll change. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, actually, why don't you just accept where they are in that moment, and you accept where you are in that moment, and maybe you'll help lead from above and help pull them on their journey, or maybe you're below them and maybe they need to help you pull up, or maybe you're both at that equal point where you're challenging each other enough to keep growing and then become supporters. But either way, it's like, I feel one of the most important things I learned on my journey was just to say, I'm grateful that's not my journey because it stepped me
Right.
out of that judgment and just let me accept where that person was at. Because so often, when you're working like as a coach or as a healer, it doesn't matter. You just want what's best for people, and you're going out there to serve, and you can see like, oh, if you just stepped out of that story you were in and just were present for a moment, you could change your whole life. But, at the same time, if they're not willing or open to accept that, or they're not at that level, like you said, you can still be your authentic self and go, okay, well, this is where they are. I'm going to let them be on their journey as much as I'm on my journey.
Yeah, and I think that that's the other piece of it, that stillness that helps you see that in an ecosystem, everything is useful, right? The natural world doesn't have garbage cans, like where I can just put something off and somebody else comes and takes them away, right? I have everything that I produce in whatever way that it is can be used by somebody at some point. And if not, if that can't be used by anybody in the ecosystem, then there has to be this play of, okay, do I stop producing it? Is there another being that's going to come in and be able to evolve into being able to use this? Like, that's where that experimentation and dance comes. But it has to be an experimentation, right? We don't know. And so we're open to it. So if something I am doing or a way that I'm thinking, like you said, is not being absorbed by my ecosystem, it's not useful to the ecosystem and to the goals that I want that this ecosystem accomplishes, whatever that ecosystem might be that I'm currently in, then the question becomes, again, who do I experiment with to see where this goes? And I think it takes us out a little bit of the very easily achieved judgment zone where you think, oh, well, if you do this or do that. I kind of approach it from the perspective of, I actually don't know how that thing that you're doing that today is creating you tons of problems could be useful for the ecosystem, but I trust that it is somewhere. So let's then go from that perspective of rather the I need to get rid of it, something is wrong with me perspective, from the, oh, well, if this thought came into my mind, the thought has to have an origin that gives it a reason for being. In some place, this thought was useful. Now it's no longer useful. So either I have to go back to when it was useful, which most often we don't want to go do. So an example I'll use is if you have issues with money, right, where you're afraid of never having enough money or something like that, most likely one example for why that could be where you're having a mindset of like conserve, conserve, conserve because money is not going to come around because of all these things, could have been that your family dynamic didn't have a lot of money, but the way that your parents presented it to you was they didn't help you understand when money comes in, when money comes out, how does that actually flow and work. They just continuously presented to you there's not enough money. And so you went into conservation mode and you put a little bodyguard that said, hey, anytime I go to spend money or anytime money even tries to be made and brought into the system, because again, I was just taught there isn't any. So I say to you, anytime there is no money, like money starts to flow, or worse, I start to spend, block me, hold me back. So it was useful in the context of the environment your parents had created, which there wasn't money for whatever reason, and you were just seeing scarcity. And so you were into conservation mode and you just held on tight and were like really pinching your pennies type of thing. But that also means that your parents never taught you what happens when money comes in. So you've blocked that as well. So you've blocked, oh, money can't come into my system and money can't come out of my system because it's like this closed system. So now if you look at it from an environment where now I'm in an environment where there is the opportunity to money because I'm good at my job, because there's people around me who are giving me gifts for whatever reason, or, money flows in a different way. I don't know what to do with that. So I have to imagine, okay, my ecosystem has changed. That skill set is not wrong. It was just useful for a different environment. So now I need to say, what about it needs to change? What do I need to learn or adapt or anything in order for the same kind of mechanism to recognize the new ecosystem and therefore not block my ability to neither make money or spend money, but instead open me up to new possibilities that this ecosystem affords that my other ecosystem didn't. Hopefully that made
Yeah.
sense.
It did. It made perfect sense. And it's funny because this theme has come up a lot. Personally, I've gone through this where when I sold my company and I got quite a lot of money, I was like, great, I'll be fine from now on. But subconsciously, I hadn't healed all those money patterns. So then just had pushed it all away. Like to this point,
Yep.
to this day, I still don't know exactly where it all went. And it wasn't like we were going out on like multi, expensive holidays or, throwing it all away. I genuinely don't know. But that it was when I stepped back and sat with it that I went, it's because I believe subconsciously I hadn't worked really hard to earn that money, even though I'd worked really hard to build up the company to a point to sell it. So why would I keep it? Why would I keep it? I didn't deserve that. I didn't, and it was unpacking all that. And like you said, creating this new ecosystem. So then when it came in, it's like, well, actually, no, now we're actually going to invest that money and allow it to grow and always have kind of some sort of flow with that. And then I had a client the other week and she was working through this. And she goes, I realized that my scarcity mindset around money came from my parents, like you were discussing before. And she said, we always went, she's from Europe, and she said, we always went for hikes. And there was this ice cream shop, when we went for hikes, and we'd always say, like her and her siblings, can we have an ice cream? Oh, no, like it's not worth the money. And da, 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 da. And she's like, but I knew they had the money and it wasn't a matter of like, asking for a lot. She goes, it was just an ice cream. Like it's just, the little child in me is like, I just want an ice cream. Can't we do it at least once or something special? And then she realized it triggered this pattern in her ecosystem that led to like her always saying no to the little things all the time, even though she really, really wanted them. So then she would deny herself things because she felt like, in her mindset, oh no, we don't spend money on things like that. And she's had to work really hard and unpacking that. And it's just, I feel like a lot of the time people don't realize we have belief systems and there's nothing wrong with them until we outgrow them, and we need that new ecosystem and that new pattern to step into.
Right. Right. Absolutely. I mean, that's probably the hardest part. And I think our society has kind of taught us that these are your problems, right? So we look at them in an isolation, but reductionist models, we know, don't give us the full picture. And so thinking of ourselves kind of in a more expansive way allows us to see all the different pieces. I live in community. And so we talk about, even in nature, when you say evolution happens most quickly in any kind of relationship, whether those are mutualisms or parasitisms or any kind of sort, because these organisms, these 2-3 organisms that are working together, have to find a way to coexist over time. I mean, lichen is a great example. You have these, 2 fungi and an algae that have learned how to create a whole new being that we identify as lichen. We don't identify it as two fungi and an algae. We say lichen because lichen have evolved super quickly in this 3-part mutualism between them. And so having these mirrors, when we think of even in ourselves, having the mirrors around ourselves and looking at every single aspect of these mirrors, which we do it in community by having people who annoy the crap out of you in a meeting, and you're like, oh, okay, you're being a mirror of something. I guess I got to go look at that. It's like you can't avoid it because everything is done in, so many things are done in group. And so you realize it. And that's that whole, again, living ecosystem is I have to look at myself as a piece of whole. And that whole can have multiple dimensions to it, from the micro to the macro. And then when I look at that as a complete model, I can say, okay, where are the pieces that need to evolve, adapt, in those types of perspectives in order for the ecosystem to be healthier and to run better.
And I love what you said, the example of the meeting that you're in, because so often people will run away from their triggers, but we need to actually learn how to run towards them, because that is where you'll get the healing and the greatest shifts. And once you accept that and go, my spiritual mentor and I, we used to joke that, as if you want to do this again, like go learn the lessons, go jump in, rather than having to come back again and do them again. It's
Absolutely.
like, no, let's just get it done. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a different perspective. I spend a lot of times, just really staring out at nature, like even looking out the window right now. I have a combination of, the plants in my home who are then looking out into the others, and all these different shades of green and how they fit together. And it just reflects on me the idea that it all fits together somehow. There's something that moves in there that allows there to be this harmony between all these different pieces. And that's exactly what we're looking to find. We're not looking to say anything is absolutely not useful, because I don't believe in that at all. I believe that everything has its use. You just have to find how to use it, when to use it, and how much of it to use.
Yeah, and learning to, like, okay, what needs to be composted and and it needs to be, let go of, so that you can step into that new period of growth as well. Because, so often if you watch even a tree grow, occasionally they'll drop branches. I know we had all these eucalypt gums growing like really closely together. So first of all, we had to have a chat with them, and we're like, we kind of need to thin you guys out a little bit, because none of you are going to survive like this, because they were all so close. But then also they had so many dead branches underneath, and, I was like, how would these disappear in nature? Because I was there cutting them back to try and honor the tree and allow it to actually grow more. And then I was like, oh, the cockatoos. And we, like, the white cockatoos in Australia are one of those birds that we have a love-hate relationship with, because they'll come, and if you feed them or you like honor them, and then they'll start to eat your house. They'll, like, especially if it's wood, right? But then we're like, there are a million trees around you. Why are you eating my one balcony? But at the same time, we need them because they're the ones that pull the branches off the trees, and they're the ones that
Mhm.
help it shed and so that they can keep growing. And like you said, it's that ecosystem. It all comes down to everything having that part. So as much as it can be really annoying for a person going, oh my gosh, they're eating my balcony, at the same time, if you didn't have them, then the trees around you wouldn't be thriving, that you can, breathe that air and have that beautiful relationship with. And before, when you were saying about Gary the silver birch, silver fir, sorry, I was like, oh, she names them too. Or you get the
I
name
don't
from
name them,
them,
they
right?
name themselves.
They give you the name.
It's
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
totally give, and
Yeah.
I was just talking to somebody about this because we were having a deep conversation about, so I'm somebody who in the past has named, like, like my car has always had names or things like that, where there's always been little elements that have had names. But for example, the plants that live with me, not all of them have names. And it took me a while to even tap into that consciously. Like subconsciously, I've never named a plant just to name a plant, because I've always waited for the name. But I had also never given any kind of consideration to the fact that not all the plants that live with me have names. So Gary gave me a name right away. As soon as I moved here, Gary was like, yo, hi. And it's spelled very unusually. It's kind of like a mix between English and Italian. And I have no idea why. It doesn't make any sense. It's not a name I would have ever thought of. And on the same front, it's funny because there's like sitting around me, there's only 4 plants that have names. But for example, there was a plant that I tried to psychologically name. In other words, I took the name from, like it was my will. I have never remembered I had to put it on a Post-it note next to the plant, and the Post-it note eventually fell. And I was like, okay, I get it. This isn't your name. And the plant was like, nope. And it's funny because it has nothing to do with my relationship with the plant. It's just, there is something about some plants that say, no, yes. Well, no, yes. Yes, I have a name, and this is important for whatever reason for you to refer to me, or for us to have that type of relationship. I've had also plants that have been very adamant of, I'm not giving you a name because that's not the type of relationship we have. We're not having a verbal relationship. You and I communicate in a completely different way. Don't get too used to this idea of talking to me. I mean, I've come to understand that after time, because that's not how you and I communicate. So therefore a name is not necessary, because you're never going to call me out in that way. And then I have other plants that instead are like, a name is something that helps kind of, give a framework to it. And others that are like, we're just going to talk now and then. You and I are not like, we live together and we're friends, but we're not like chitty chatty. So I got nothing. And there's tons of the plants that live in my home that are like that. So it's been something that, because people often ask me about this question, it's been something that I've been asking for more kind of guidance and understanding, especially since there is, for example, one plant that lives literally right next to my bed. It's first being I see every single morning, because I kind of almost always wake up facing that direction. I love this plant. Like, there is a deep, deep, deep love that I'm still trying to unravel and understand. And yet, even though I talk to this plant, I've received something in a form that I still don't know how to put my finger on, and I have never been able to quantify, and I don't really talk out loud as much about this plant, even though this plant is, like I said, first one I see every morning, and last person I see every evening. And definitely on, like, there is something happening there. And yet it's passing through a sense that it's never even crossed my mind to give this plant a name. Like never, like nothing of that has come out through.
I love this because I've had the same experience. So it's really interesting. So there's a plant, actually a tree. It's not a plant, it's a tree. And he was so
Which is a
grumpy.
plant.
Which is a plant, I know. But I kept walking past, and every day I'd say hi, and he's like that's the energy I'd get back. And then after a few weeks I wore him down and he's like, hi. And I was like, oh, hello. He actually said hi back. And then it ended up his name was Burns, and I just laughed because you can tell he's been through multiple bushfires. So he just has owned that as his personality. But then further down that same kind of walk, there's Beth, and Caroline, and then there's John, and and then there's this playful baby eucalypt called Timmy, and he likes to hide, and it's so amazing. You wouldn't think a tree could hide their energy, but they can. They can actually dim it down to the point you can't see them, and then show it back out again. And I was walking, and I often used to take a lot of kids like in little nature walks, and we go connect with the trees, like we go talk to them. And my son's like, oh, that one's called Heidi. And I said, what tree are you talking about? And it was this tree. It was hidden behind all these other trees. And he's like, that's why her name's Heidi, because she needs to hide her energy. She doesn't like to be out in the open. I was like, oh my gosh, if a 6-7-year, I think he was like 6 or 7 at the time, if a 6-7-year-old can sense this, how amazing, how have we tuned this out so much? Yep. But exactly like you said, then other ones, it's just a feeling you get when you're around them, and that that's the connection you have with them. Or, and so often we've been trained to, cut back the gardens to have the lawn and that sort of thing. Whereas we've let our garden turn into whatever it wants. So people would say it's full of weeds. We say, no, it's full of magic, because so often the long grass, especially the ryegrass and things like that, the kangaroos come and eat it, and all those sorts of things. But the magic thing is, if you let your garden grow how it's meant to grow, it'll just start growing plants that you have no idea where it came from, and they're always perfect for you. So I remember I was studying herbalism, and this plant showed up in our garden, and I'm like, what is that? And then, of course, the universe heard. And the next page I opened was a picture of this plant. It was agrimony. And now we don't have any agrimony around. We don't have it planted anywhere. And I was like, what is that for? And it was just a few weeks before I'd been talking to someone, and she said, if plants will grow in your garden that your body needs. And then sure enough, this plant was for the liver, and I've been working on detoxing my liver. And I was like, oh, and how perfect. It's actually at that stage where I can go ask it for its leaves to harvest to turn into a tea. So I was like, wow. Yeah, Thank you. It's just... Exactly. Thank you. But it's allowing that magic to come through, and not to have this idea of this is what our garden's supposed to look like, and actually sometimes I feel that's a reflection of your own ecosystem too, that you have to have that neatness, and you have to have that control, whereas nature can just be as wild as it wants to be sometimes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's exactly it. I mean, we hear these stories, and we think of them as just stories, and it's like, they're not stories. You just have to start experimenting with it yourself. Give yourself the space to be able to do this, and you will see that it happens. I actually interviewed a medical doctor, Dr. Peter Hinault, a while back for my podcast, way back when. Fantastic conversation, very unexpected, because when I met him at first, you're like, what kind of doctor? And he's, board certified medical doctor, but who went through a really intense shamanic experience with a specific teacher and all these different parts. And he was like, it's the plant at home that you have that relationship with that's going to really heal you. So when he was going through a hard time, I mean, he ended up in a deep healing relationship with rosemary. And he's like, it's not about the properties of rosemary, which of course can happen like it did in your case. But that wasn't what the relationship and the healing was really based off. The healing was based on my relationship with this particular rosemary plant that then opened up to a whole series of other understandings and transformations and evolutions and parts of his body that were activating. And so that, that's where the healing was coming from. It wasn't about ingesting necessarily rosemary. It was about taking in everything else rosemary had to offer that really brought in the deep healing that he needed, physically, like not just emotionally, but physical healing that he needed in. And again, if our senses are all shut down, if our ability to really listen to our body and our somatic intuition or somatic data readings are all shut down because society has told you that, you listen to what I tell you that is right and wrong, and somebody else has to confirm it for you, and these things don't count, or whatever else words that we've been told all our lives, then sure enough, we can't hear it. And therefore, we're not going to be able to create or actually recognize, better said, when the elements that really allow us to thrive are all around us, or worse, we're going to actively prevent them from coming into our lives. We're going to create barriers and push away what is necessary, such as mowing your lawn, which, would then create this massive, which mowing the lawn, like the whole concept of a lawn really
I know, it's
comes
bizarre.
from this colonistic idea that having land that doesn't have to be good for anything, because that's literally how they thought of it, is something to be proud of. Like, I have so much money and so much wealth and so much blah, 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 that I could have these large swaths of land that do not have to be neither agriculture or useful or productive or anything that is in any which way producing life for the planet. I can just mow them down and keep them in this manicured way where I artificially keep them alive in order to show how wealthy I am. Like, literally, that's how the lawn was born. It was born as a symbol of wealth. And you're just like, what kind of wealth are we talking about? Because it's not the wealth that I want.
No, and it's so funny because when we moved to our property now, my husband was so excited that our neighbor across the road, his lawnmower broke. And we're like, great, you can have ours. We don't need it. Like, because we were just like, yes, there's no lawn, or there's no, there's some grass that's kind of taking over because that's what it's doing, which is interesting in itself. But at the same time, like, we have thistles everywhere and people are like, you have to take them out. We're like, but the Rosella birds eat them. We're like,
Right.
why do we have to take them out? Like, that's their food. And it's so cute when the rosellas eat these big thistles because they come up and they get all the white seeds stuck on there and they have like little beards. It's really cute to watch. But we would have missed out on all of that if we had just taken it all down. And don't get us wrong, like when we have a lot of bracken fern through our property, and everyone's like, oh, why is there so much bracken? I said, that is a good question. The bracken actually is here after bushfires to put the nutrients back in the soil. And they're like, oh, so we just leave it. And then when it starts to die off, we cut it down, but we don't actually pull it out because the roots need to stay in there to keep doing what it needs to do. So it's when you start to question, why is that plant there, or what's the part of that ecosystem, or why did that thistle decide to grow right in the middle of the path that I'm walking on? And what is that symbology going on in my life right now? And seen on that bigger ecosystem level too. And I feel a lot of the time, like you said, when we want to keep these really pristine gardens, that we miss that symbology. We miss those messages that nature wants to share with us to do a deeper level of healing because they want to have that relationship with us.
Absolutely. We miss that wildness. And I want to touch on something you just said. You kind of said it in passing. And we were specific, and I noticed we both did it, which was good. Like, we were using the word lawn. There's a very big difference between lawn and grass. Grass is great. Grass is one of my biggest teachers. Like, all different forms of grasses and many different plants are actually different parts of the different types of grasses. But grass rarely grows in isolation. So when we have like all that's one style of grass, one species of grass, that's where you've hit artificial lawn, and that becomes a different thing. So it makes sense that there are grasses that are growing through also in all of these, because grass is a wild plant. Grasses of different types have different properties and different aspects to them that are wonderful. I love grasses. Like, I love sitting down and learning because grass is so widespread. There's like a knowledge base there that for me is, it's kind of like beyond the human comprehension in such a way to think of myself as so expansive and to know that I cover pretty much everywhere in the globe. Like, there is a part of me somewhere all over the place. But that doesn't mean treating you like lawn, which is then all that other part that I was talking about. So yeah, I just wanted to state that because I think some people will, just the same as I don't want to demonize any kind of wild plant that today has been called a weed, and we think of weed as something we have to pull out. I don't want to demonize grass as saying it's your fault or anything like that. No, grass was chosen by, these people to create this lawn, but even they are struggling in that monocultured format that gets used in order to have that manicured space, which is also just a killing down or a kind of pushing down, a wildness within us that we as human beings are very much afraid of. We again are so kind of disconnected from our true essence, from that true nature inside of us, that, and so disconnected from the natural world outside of us, that we stifle ourselves down, and that's, we stifle our wildness down instead of celebrating that wildness as the natural evolution of self, of the fact that it's my natural expression through it. And that again, I can attenuate and I could have that relationship that allows that expression to be useful to the ecosystem, no matter how unusual or weird or, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And I love that you put up that contrast too, because how we perceive things can so often determine how we treat it as well, because it's that perception that allows us to think something's a weed when I'm assuming you're like me, when you look into most weeds, they're actually the most medicinal plants you can have. Like dandelion, right? Dandelion, you can use every part of dandelion. It does so much amazing things for your body, so it's that perception that we have. And I'm conscious, like, we could talk all night because we speak plant, but as we start to round up our time together, if you could heal or change something in the world, Tigrilla, what would it be?
If I could do one thing, is just help people remember that we are nature. That's it. I believe that the disconnection from our true nature, the fact that we are nature, that we participate in nature, we are nature, we work with nature, like it's all these things simultaneous, is the ultimate original trauma. It's the trauma that we carry deep, deep down as human beings. The moment that those worlds, the plant world and the human world and the world of the nature spirits and every other kind of pieces that are as a whole make up our natural world, started to separate out, I think that's when humans started to understand that trauma exists.
Yeah, so beautiful. So true. We're so true. I say the same things. We are nature. We come from nature. We need to remember we are part of nature. And once you start to accept that, I feel Mother Earth will allow you to keep healing through that too. So yeah. Yeah. And where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
So luckily I'm pretty easy, having a slightly unusual name. You can find me pretty much at Tigrilla Gardenia everywhere. So my website is tigrillagardenia.com. My Instagram, my Facebook, my LinkedIn is all at Tigrilla Gardenia. Like my YouTube, it's all the same name. So I'm super easy to find in that way.
Perfect. And I will make sure it's in the show notes just to make it even easier for people to find as well. So
Yay.
Thank you so much for this amazing discussion. And again, that reminder that we are nature, and also to tap into our wildness again and let that ecosystem come out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. To me, it's all about resisting the urge to hold back our emerging green brilliance. It's kind of what I always say, because that's what it feels like. It feels like we have this part of ourselves we just keep, and it's like, just resist that urge, man. Just let it out. Let it out, and it'll start to guide you.
I love it. I love it so much. Thank you so much, Tigrilla. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you. This has been great. I'm super excited, like, that we had the chance to have this conversation.
Thank you for listening to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We have so much love and gratitude that you have taken the time out of your day to empower you on your healing journey. The views shared by the person being interviewed might not necessarily reflect that of the host and should be used at your own discernment. Trust what resonates for you and follow your heart and soul guidance. If you have any underlying medical conditions or mental health issues, please consult with your healthcare provider before pursuing any of the recommendations. Likewise, you can always contact the person being interviewed to find out more information. This can be found in the show notes. Remember to activate, align, heal, empower, and find love in everything that you do.